Warm greetings, dear viewers. Welcome to our panel discussion on saving indigenous languages. I am your host, Akomdon Emma. Viewers, we are well acquainted with the fact that language is a pivotal part of human civilization. It is not just the mode of communication, but the lifeblood of culture, traditional knowledge, and ancient history for generations. Today, we will discuss what defines indigenous languages, why it is endangered, and what are the way forward to save it from extinction. To delve into the topic, we have distinguished panel experts. First, we have Dr. Vijay D'Souza, a linguist who has closely worked on Aka Hruso community and their languages and has achieved his PhD in linguistics from the University of Oxford. Second, we have Dr. Lisa Lomdak. She is an assistant professor at Arunachal Institute of Tribal Studies, Rajiv Gandhi University, also an active member of the Nishi Third Language Textbook Development Council. She has completed her PhD in linguistics from JNU Delhi. Last but not the least, we have Dr. Wanglit Mongchang, an assistant professor at Arunachal Institute of Tribal Studies, RGU, and has achieved his PhD in linguistics from the University of Mysore. Thank you so much, our panelists, for joining us today. So without wasting our time, let us know what is indigenous languages. Dr. Lisa, would you like to enlighten us about that?
Well, the word indigenous in present literature, there is a lot of differences of opinions on what indigenous really stands for. It's an ongoing discourse, but according to my research, or if we look at from indigenous people's perspective, I would define indigenous language as those language forms spoken by indigenous people before contact with the other groups, linguistic groups or other cultures. So, in its most purest form, we can say, without any language borrowings in them. So, in that way, indigenous languages would mean languages spoken by indigenous people before the contact with other cultures at the starting point. Well, indigenous languages today in our tribal studies discourse is also referred to tribal languages, Adivasi languages. These are simultaneously used for indigenous languages as well. The point of debate which occurs with indigeneity is the point that at some point all the other language groups have migrated from somewhere. But if we apply this logic or this perspective from the people's perspective of Arunachal Pradesh, when we go to field and when we collect data, especially regarding mythology or anything to do with their indigenous knowledge, many a times people the native speakers don't have memories of migration. It's only in the maps that we see, that linguistic groups are located elsewhere in other parts of the international border as well. But if we go to a village in Nishi inhabited districts or any other place here, usually they don't have memories of migration. The indigenous names that are given to the landscape around them, the native names for the mountains, for the river streams, the mountain passes, the land, all this shows that the communities lived here for thousands of years. And in that sense, we can apply the word indigenous to indigenous languages.
Okay, that's a really, really interesting insight that we got. Three of you have worked with oral community, oral speaking community, and we also want to know what are the challenges or difficulties that you have come across while researching or documenting oral languages. I'd start with our Dr. Wanglit, sir.
Of course, just start with what Lisa Ben have said. I just want to add few.
Okay.
I think indigenous language also have a linguistically very distinct. Okay, what are the for example, their culture also very distinct, and also their folklore. So this different from the so-called contact or dominant languages. That is what I just wanted to add. Regarding the challenges, of course, in terms of when we talk about documenting those languages, especially the smaller languages, one of the challenges what I have come across is First of all, when we talk about language per se, then many of these languages are undocumented. The first thing. The second is like it's very difficult to find a right person, the right resource from whom you can collect the linguistic data. That's another challenge. And third would be like, as I said, like getting informations, the correct informations, and also like resources, especially in terms of resources, like right informant, who have well knowledge about this. So these are the few, I mean, like, so far I have come across.
Okay.
So I can ask for to add one more to that.
Yeah, we would love to hear from you, sir.
Well, thank you for having me here. I'm here because of the Akaruso community. I have the honor of representing that language today, and I'm very happy that I have this privilege today. And therefore, when I worked with this Akaruso language, I would say there have been more joys than challenges. But since your question is about challenges, I will highlight a few. As Wanglit sir said, Aka is slowly getting endangered, and therefore it is very difficult to get all that ancient wisdom. People are still speaking their language, they are keeping it alive, and they are proud of their language still, but the elders who knew all the stories and folklore, they are slowly passing away, and they are not passing these traditions on to the next generation.
Okay.
So the richest aspects of these indigenous languages in Arunachal are disappearing very fast. So there is an urgent need to revive those traditions. Even in languages in Arunachal, languages that are healthy, we need to still recover all the ancient wisdom that these languages have. That I feel is the main challenge.
What about you, Lisa ma'am?
Well, for the challenges that we had directly while documenting folk narratives, as Wanglit also mentioned, the enormity of language, data that we have to deal with. Sometimes within same language groups, there are different pronunciations for the same word, and sometimes for the same object they have different words, leave alone pronunciations. So for a linguist, the minimum requirement of coming up with a good grammar, descriptive grammar, is 3 to 5 years, and then they are dealing with just one dialect, regional variation of the language. So the amount of time searching for good resource person who would give us the correct pronunciation of the word, and also that takes a lot of time. It's a very meticulous work that linguists have to do at every level, sound level, the word, and then the sentence. So it takes time, and by the time one finishes one grammar, it's just one dialect they are dealing with of a very enormous. So this enormity of language data, that is only half covered. This is what we realized. Secondly is also, as linguists, we are working on only one layer, that is the spoken language layer. There are so many other layers we have to yet start our work on, like we have literary language, in which your community folk songs, poetry, all proverbs, all these languages. Literary language is very different from spoken languages. Linguists are dealing only with the spoken variety. Then in addition, we have the languages of the priest, the shaman, again very archaic, very different with its own codes, and that only very few competent speakers know how to translate it for us. Okay, so I mean there are so many challenges to document oral literature, but we have begun the work.
That's really interesting. One of the really interesting point that Wanglit sir have pointed about the dominant languages and the minor languages, right? We live in a country where there is lots of culture. It's a mosaic of culture out there. And between that, you know, diversity, there is always this philosophy of tolerance are there. And that within that philosophy, there is always conflict, especially in language and ethnic. So in that process, sometimes the structure of dominant language is adopted by the lesser known languages and minor languages. So I wanted to know for our viewers, they'll be a little confused with what is dominant languages and what is minor languages. We would like to know about that. And at the same time, what are the things that you have observed in terms of Arunachal, the dynamics? Arunachal ka jo dynamic hai, aapne kya observe kiya? I would love to know that from our Dr. Vijay, because you have worked with the community very closely. So would you like to enlighten us about that?
Yeah, to answer the first part of your question, what are dominant languages and then what are smaller languages or minority or minoritized languages? So dominant languages are languages with more power. I did not use the population.
Okay.
So a language may have more population, still it may be a powerless language. So languages with more power, economic power, political power, these are all dominant languages. And because of the power that they have, they tend to be imposed on other languages, which are low resource languages, and they are not as powerful politically or economically as the dominant languages. So this is the power dynamic that takes place. So there is pressure on the so-called minority languages or minoritized languages, and many of our indigenous languages are, they come under this category. So there is direct and indirect imposition of power from the dominant languages, and then that their attitudes are created in speakers of minority languages that our language is not good enough. If we speak our language, we will not progress, and therefore we need to speak the language of somebody else. So we need to give up our language. So sometimes directly, sometimes tacitly, they're told like this, and that's how languages get endangered.
Oh, that's really interesting.
I'll come to it when we speak later about linguicide.
Okay, so I actually wanted to know about the context of Arunachal, because I as well has been, whenever I have a conversation with my siblings, they say, why don't you speak your own language? They said, we don't see any use of it, in government jobs, and wherever government exams they want to do, apna language seekhe kya karega? They ask for Hindi and English. We'd rather be acquainted in that rather than our language. So I wanted to know the scenario of Arunachal. Lisa ma'am, would you highlight that?
Yeah, Arunachal Pradesh is like the classic example of what happens when it comes with contact with so-called dominant languages. First of all, many things have happened in our state. According to languages, it is so rich in language diversity. We have, language groups from Tibeto-Burman, Tai Kadai, the Lolo Burmese, and then we have Bodic languages, so many languages. When we were enumerating for Center for Endangered Languages, and we were looking at the linguistic definition, that there is a term called mutual intelligibility. Means to what extent you can understand the other, other's language. So when we applied this, this definition, we saw that we could see that more than 45 languages that we that were in record, we could identify this might be separate languages, for if we look from linguistics perspective. But then these small groups are subgrouped within, bigger, larger groups as, subgroup of this tribe, subgroup of that tribe. So it's altogether another debate. So first, language diversity of various language families. Then contact with Indo-Aryan language, Hindi, Assamese, Nepali, all these languages. And most impact have been made by Indo-Aryan languages on the, so-called tribal or indigenous languages. Like they have directly, been borrowed in our linguistic structures. It has affected our verbal morphology, how, means very, in the grammar itself, they have been used so much that sometimes a native speaker doesn't know whether it's a Nishi word or it's a borrowed word, like suppose Manaido, you know. We are celebrating Sim Lagi Do. So Lagi, so all these are actually borrowed feature from Indo-Aryan languages. So so this influence of other languages are so intensive and so intricate in our language grammars that we are not we are losing our own words for our own indigenous or native words for these terms. It has affected numbers, it has our number system, it has affected our relations with our kith and kin, the kinship terminology. So and of course, because the school curriculum has absolutely no space for indigenous languages. So this debate, now that NEP has 2020 NEP, has stated that mother tongue languages should be, it should be used in the school curriculum. Now the another debate is whether we call our languages as third language or first language. So there is technical problem with that. I think we can have separate debate on that. But the government of Arunachal has come up with list of, I think, 23 languages. February 2024, I think the notification came out where the indigenous languages have been given third language label. Okay, so this is official declaration by the government of Arunachal Pradesh, and we need to note that, and the same will be applied in school curriculum as well, but it is too late. Generations of our tribal children, us included, we have never had space where our mother languages were given space in school curriculum. So the damage is done, but because we are still speaking the language, we still have language speakers around us. It is not too late also, I would like to say, because it has, 9 languages are already being taught in government schools today of Arunachal Pradesh.
Okay, that's really interesting. And there was a list by UNESCO during 2022 where it recognized 192 languages, endangered languages, and out of that 5 of them were from Arunachal. So I also wanted to know, what degree defines a language as an endangered? What are the quality or the elements or the factor that defines a language as, endangered? Would you like to enlighten us about that, Wanglet sir?
Okay, before coming to these questions, just 3 points which I want to add to what the other 2 panelists has already said, talk about. In context, especially Arunachal Pradesh, we talk about when 2 different languages are coming together. And we know like Arunachal is a multilingual states where one individual person can speak at least more than 2 or 3 languages a child can speak. Now you were asking about, I remember if I'm not wrong, about the structural changes, when different languages come together and how they influence each other. So in context of Arunachal Pradesh, I think the structural change hasn't been so far, prominent.
Okay.
But in terms of borrowing, like in words, as Lisa Men was saying, in terms of sound, borrowing for every individual sound, all those things are very prominent. For example, we have this common sound, per. Per is a very common sound. But these days, due to influence of English, they change with the fricative fa.
Okay.
So, father, for example, actually it's a father, but actually it should be, when you borrowed it, it should be father, when you borrowed it in the local term. But people still call it as father. So they keep on, there is a borrowing of sound is there. But structurally, as I said, it takes time to, one language, getting changed into that structure in terms of structure. Of course, and I think in Nokte we often use J. This is a term which is coming from Assamese actually. J, not this particular. So usually we use that. So that kind of slowly it's coming up a little bit, into the local languages. So that is what. Now regarding this endangered language, there are, of course, one of the factor is like number of speakers. Why a particular language become endangered? when you have a smaller number of speakers, then there's a definitely is a possible that that language becomes, you know, endangered. That's one thing. And also, like, when you don't give a more importance, like in terms of preservations, protections. For example, I think later on we will be talking about 8th scheduled languages, which is giving, you know, recognitions, protection of this indigenous language. But so when you don't protect that language, then definitely that language will, in long run, it will die. That is what. So number of speakers, and then, you know, immediate protections you need, and all domain. If you have, you know, give more domains, users, you know, then it will survive. So at the end, I just wanted to say, like, if you want to save the indigenous language, then the only thing is use it, or you lose it. That is the only thing. Like, if you use it, then you will preserve it. Otherwise, you lose it. That's it.
So that was really interesting insight that you gave on the degree of endangerment. I'll come to Dr. Vijay. Dr. Vijay, in one of a very interesting interview with Dr. Kikon, Dolly Kikon, you have mentioned about linguicide. So I was really intrigued to know what is linguicide and the factors leading to it. In context of Arunachal, if you can give us some examples.
Yeah. Linguicide in simple terms means killing a language. Now, when we speak about endangered languages, we say languages are getting endangered, they are moving towards extinction, they are going to die, as if the languages are doing something. That is not the case. Most often language don't die by themselves, they are killed. How are they killed? They can be killed directly or indirectly. Directly, I will give you an example. In some countries, certain languages are banned. You can be punished for speaking that language. It happened to my ancestors in Goa. My mother tongue is Konkani, and it was a punishable offense speaking that language. So people could be jailed or punished, beaten up and all that. So that is direct linguicide. You by force you are killing a language. But what is happening in Arunachal and other indigenous places, although it is still a linguicide, it is indirect linguicide.
Okay.
So that connects to your previous question actually, how is that languages are getting endangered. So indirect linguicide works like this. You create certain attitudes in the speakers of the language that your language is not good enough. It will not bring you progress, and therefore you need to give up your language, and therefore the native speakers themselves start abandoning their language, and that's how language is killed. So this is one way of indirectly killing the language, and that's still linguicide. And it creates a lot of harm, as we know, when we lose our language, and people are emotionally attached to the language, and yet they feel what I speak is not good enough, therefore I need to become somebody else, and we can never be there. I cannot speak Hindi like a person from Bihar or UP, and I give up that thing that is so precious to me because I want to really be someone else. So this kind of inner conflict, and then emotional damage that comes with it, the rootlessness that comes with it. So these are all processes connected with linguicide.
Oh, that's really interesting. Lisa ma'am and Wanglitsa, you both have worked as an assistant coordinator at Center for Endangered Languages. In regards to the same topic, what factors that you have observed, in regarding to the decline or endangerment of the language, or how does the term linguicide have fit in your research?
Well,
both of you can.
We went with the textbook definition of what endangered language meant.
Okay.
And we realized for Arunachal, we wanted to focus on certain kind of languages, like our criteria was paucity of written literature on them, like any groups which have not been written about, like there is no visible literature on them. This was one, one point that we wanted to highlight. The population of speakers were also important for us, because endangered language also has scale of endangerment, different degrees of endangerment. So we found two specific level of endangerment. One was the moribund,
Okay.
spoken only by the older generation, and population is also less. Like Ashing was an example where we found out only 50, 50 or 150 speakers were there, and only the elders could communicate in that language, Ashing, moribund language, and it's a subgroup of the Adi, So in literature, 60 years back, 50 years back, somebody had written about them, a non-Arunachali scholar had written about them, but when our team, Center for Endangered Language team, went to the field, the only village, Nyereng, which is in Upper Siang, they found out that the reality is completely different, and so update of the demography, their ethno-linguistic profile, these were all important. The another degree which really was relevant for us were critically endangered. That population is also less, and the competency of language, like whether the speakers can speak fluently, the language or not. So the Mayor language in Anzao district. So we focus, and even Kasik, which is the literary language of the Nokte, so all this, this endangered text or endangered language, in that sense that there was very less research on these groups, and population was also very less, and then Tangam also. So these criteria were important, but direct linguicide would be too extreme term to use as of now. I mean, some groups also would rather, what we found out, that smaller groups were more, in fact, successful in preserving or retaining their knowledge system. Like Tangam was an example. I mean, in our groups, there were a lot of research scholars from other Adi groups also, like Padam and Minyong. And when they did research on another Adi group, which is Tangam, they said that they found some rituals which they had never seen in their village. So some rituals, where women were, the main, those who celebrated the rituals, and the names of the plants, the folk narratives, they had never seen this in their village earlier. So linguicide in that, what I feel is would be an extreme term right now. But yes, there are different ways that languages of Arunachal are endangered.
Thank you so much, viewers, for joining with us. I hope we catch you up on our next episode. Goodbye.